Okay, folks, let's call the special council meeting to order, and I will recess it until after the Open General Purposes Committee. So with that, I'll call the Open General Purposes Committee meeting to order. Motion on the minutes? So moved. All those in favor, post carried. So then we've got the housing items. So, staff, John Hopkins, Suzanne, I don't know, Wade's part of it. Wade's over there. It's fine. Okay, folks, what do you want to tell us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to provide a brief presentation on Bill 44 and a summary of the report in front of you. So this is the first of two reports that respond to the provincial housing bills that have compliance deadlines of June 30th, 2024. The first report on the agenda relates to Bill 44, which requires local governments to amend zoning bylaws in affected areas to permit small-scale multi-unit housing, or SMA development. Although there was an application to the province for compliance extension to the Steveston neighborhood, there is no exemption process from Bill 44. Those affected areas include lots where current zoning does not permit the minimum number of units as prescribed by the province. The province is requiring that a minimum of 3 units be permitted on residential lots that are approximately 3,000 square feet or less. A minimum of 4 units be permitted on residential lots that are greater than 3,000 square feet. And a minimum of 6 units must be permitted on residential lots that are greater in area than approximately 3,000 square feet when wholly or partly within 400 meters of a bus stop that has frequent transit service, which is about 15 minutes during the day. For areas where a minimum of 6 units is required, local government does have the ability to secure the 6th unit as an affordable housing unit. Also, for those areas, no minimum on-site parking is allowed. Overall, Bill 44 would impact over 26,000 single-family and duplex zoned lots, which is illustrated in attachment 1 and 2 of your report. Staff have reviewed the legislative requirements and the provincial guidelines and have prepared a Made in Richmond response that would comply with the legislation. Attachment 3 and 4 in your report provide an illustrated summary of the recommended built form regulations. The modeling study in attachment 4 considers the ability of various built forms to meet city objectives, which include preserving current built form and massing characteristics, minimizing parking impacts on the streetscape, maintaining tree preservation objectives using building setbacks, building family-friendly units, and encouraging accessibility and visitability. The modeling study also compares the recommended built form with those suggested by the provincial guidelines, which would approximate the massing of former land use contract homes. With this, staff recommend a new zoning district, RSM, for single-family zone properties that would allow anywhere from 3 to 6 units depending on lot size and proximity to frequent transit. The RSM zone would have 4 subzones which would reflect the current sizes of each lot. As a result, we have a small, medium, large, and an extra large RSM zone, which would limit subdivision in most areas. As Richmond is in an affordable housing crisis with a lack of affordable rentals, especially outside of the city center, allowing multiplexes to become strata units would be restricted in the RSM zone. For properties that are already zoned for duplexes and may include strata units, the zoning will remain in place. The opportunity to create a strata duplex in existing duplex zones would remain. Some of the specific amendments in the new RSM zone and the amended duplex zones include reducing on-site parking rates as suggested by the province. Secondly, there's no change to the overall building massing. That is no change to building height, which is 9 meters. Number of stories still at 2.5 and site coverage at 45%. With respect to single-family development, with or without a secondary suite, there's virtually no change in built form regulations, including the floor area ratio. For duplexes and above, there would be more flexibility in building massing, which would include an increase in floor area ratio from 0.55 to 0.6 for the first 5,000 square feet of the lot, removing the floor area exemption for garage space, and allowing flex space, which can be used for either the garage floor area or living area. And there would be a bump up in the flex space for 3 units and above. There's also some flexibility added to how the vertical building envelope is measured to encourage floor area to be used in the half story, which is on the 3rd level. In most cases, a development permit for form and character would not be required. The only exception is if the property is in an ESA, or environmentally sensitive area, or if the lot is in a regular shape, or for development that proposes to encroach into the setback area. Overall, the approach to Bill 44 would maintain house-like form, scale, and would be compatible with existing neighborhood development. It would also provide enhanced flexibility for multiplex development compared to single-family development. It would protect green space and the existing tree canopy by maintaining lot coverage and setbacks, and would prioritize rental by limiting strata to existing duplex zoned lots. Council should be reminded that with the compressed deadlines, this is really the first pass on these bylaw amendments. Considerable effort has been made to ensure compliance and address Richmond's needs. However, it is understood that further consultation has not taken place with residents or home builders. Further, there are numerous implications from these housing bills that need to be considered. There will also be a series of public meetings to be held in July on Bill 44 throughout the city, in addition to consultation with the small home builders. Further bylaw amendments would be expected from this consultation, perhaps later this year. Lastly, there'll be numerous follow-up reports and potential bylaw amendments related to potential residential parking permit program due to the removing the minimum on-site parking for areas that allow 6 units. There will also be results of the consultant study to engage small home builders and the public regarding zoning and development refinements and updating development financing models based on other provincial bills. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, why don't you give us a presentation for the next one on the transit-oriented areas? Because, I mean, there's going to be overlap between the two.
Yep, okay. So the following report in your agenda package is on Bill 47. It responds to Bill 47, which is intended to intensify residential density around transit hubs. As in Bill 44, there's no exemption process. Bill 47 requires local governments to designate transit-oriented areas, or TOAs, by bylaw and remove residential parking minimums within those areas by June 30th, 2024. A TOA is an area defined by the province where the province sets minimum densities and height using building stories for residential or mixed-use development that includes residential. These minimums are what the province calls a minimum allowable density framework, or MD framework. In Richmond, TOA affected areas are within 800 meters of 5 designated SkyTrain stations, including the Bridgeport, Capstan, Aberdeen, Lansdowne, and Bridge House Canada Line station. It does not include the Sea Island stations. One thing to note is that within the current TOA designated areas, they may be expanded with the introduction of any new rapid transit stations or off-street transit bus exchanges, such as the Steveston Bus Exchange, if that were to happen. That could have a significant implication as the MD framework would apply in those situations and would be really up to the province. But not all of the current TOA overlaps the current city center area plan. The city center area plan is built upon transit-oriented development framework, which directs the highest density and greatest mix of uses within a 5-minute walk of a transit station. One thing to note is the MD framework only applies to areas that are designated for residential land uses. Therefore, areas near the Bridgeport and Aberdeen Canada Line stations that have been designated for non-residential purposes or uses, and they've been designated for that for decades due to its proximity to the flight path, are not subject to the MD framework. Of course, the one-size-fits-all approach has impacts to areas that were not envisioned to have towers. This would include a large portion of the Oaks neighborhood, which is subject to the TOA designation, or Tier 3 as they call it, and prescribes a 3 floor area ratio or a minimum of 8 stories, and that's a significant increase for an existing single-family residential neighborhood. Another area that's impacted is in Burkeville, where there's 11 properties included in the TOA Tier 3. Once again, minimum of 8 stories or 3 FAR. The report proposes to exclude those properties from TOA, as staff believe it was not the province's intention to allow lots physically disconnected from public transit station to be included. The properties are physically separated by the Fraser River from the closest public transit station identified as a TOA. Staff do recommend adding areas within the city's center area as strategic expansion of the TOA to prevent Bill 44 or SHMU development of properties, which would be contrary to OCP land uses or for consistency with the Spires road rental policy. So two of the areas are areas that are designated for non-residential uses. Those are areas that we would not want to see built as multiplexes under Bill 44. Therefore, we're looking at adding those to the TOA. And then with Spires Road, it's largely properties along that are butting Garden City Road, that it would be ideal to have those as part of the TOA rather than seeing those properties redeveloped as multiplexes, as council has an interest in seeing higher densities for that neighborhood. Another thing to point out is that some of the height minimums are impacted by Transport Canada's airport zoning regulations. However, there would still be a minimum FAR, which would be as high as 5 within 200 meters of a Canada Line station. This could lead to additional bulk, especially if parking is exempt from the floor area. Although there are bylaw amendments that remove the minimum residential parking requirements as per Bill 47, staff expect that parking would still be included in most, if not all, residential tower proposals. As such, staff recommend reviewing the building massing implications of the FAR exemption for above-grade parking with within a TOA in response to the elimination of minimum residential off-street parking requirements and the increased residential densities and building heights prescribed by Bill 47. So the next steps will include separate reports that will consider updating the city's development cost charges, applying new amenity cost charges, and establishing required reserve accounts for DCCs and other amenities as prescribed by the province. There will also be a shift from a density bonus approach to an inclusionary zoning approach to secure affordable housing, which is part of Bill 16. Those will be dealt with in later reports. Happy to answer any questions on that report as well.
Comments, questions? All right. Yeah, Councilman.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of questions to follow. Most, I think, probably will all relate to item number 1, Bill 44. First off, I just want to say that I feel that both of these provincial housing bills have done injustice to our processes here in the city, to the impact it's going to have on our OCP, our official community plan process, which should have started or should have been much further along than it is now, and the impact this has had on our staff and the prioritization of the work that they've been hired to do in our city with our own specific regional issues. My first question relates to something outside of the report, and then everything else will come right back to the report. It's our Community Energy and Emissions Plan, our CEEP. One of the components of our city's strategy and target is to have green infrastructure. And I'm not sure if staff can comment on how this will likely prevent a huge component that we were planning to do at the end of the CEEP process, right? We're doing the quick wins now, things related to electric vehicles and new building requirements. But all of this stuff that we were planning to do at the end to make really significant impacts are now going to be land that was going to be underneath housing. So I'm not sure, is that factored in at all do we have to rework our whole community energy emissions plan as a result of this?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, what I would say is that the bylaws in front of you do not significantly change what's currently allowed in a built form today with respect to lot coverage, with respect to building height and setbacks. And actually I see Mr. Russell right behind me, so he will be able to fill in the rest of the blanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, staff at this point are assessing the impacts of the bills. I don't foresee major changes to the energy and emission plan. The strategy area and the actions that you noted don't directly relate to that scale of development. The opportunities for green infrastructure are much higher level and much larger in nature.
All right, yeah, I'll disagree with that, but I also agree that There are components of green infrastructure that's going to require purchasing land in the future, and land is going to be a lot more expensive when there's that many more units on it, and also that much more utilities going to facilities or properties. More now specific into this report. Unfortunately, on our page 22, it highlights that there's a number of ways that cities could be exempt. There's only a few limited exemptions, and one of them is that land that's protected by bylaws as a heritage property. And then on the next page, it says that Richmond doesn't qualify any of those exempted properties. So it's, I don't need really a response to it. It's just unfortunate we don't have designation on land to actually protect it for its heritage value. As many of us would think that we have a lot of heritage structures that are used for residential at the time, none would qualify. Next one I have is number 20, on page 27. It talks, as was mentioned by staff, there's a few things that will trigger the development permit process. One of such is environmental sensitive areas, and in brackets, the current practice. So a question I have for staff is, will we be submitting our existing ESA map, and will that be tied to this future development permit triggering process? Or as part of our OCP, we're for a long time, we've been talking about getting an actual factual environmental sensitive area map that shows the real significant areas that were not included on the last one, or that have been lost since that map was created. So can we provide the province in the future a new ESA map that then would trigger a lot more areas or a lot more development permits?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, it would be the latter. We'll be submitting the bylaws with respect to the new zone, but we'll not be submitting the current environmentally sensitive areas map to the province. That will be revised as part of the OCP process.
Terrific. That's very positive to hear. Last two brief comments. One highlights on our example I had was on our page 42. It's this attachment 4, which is called small-scale multi-unit housing, the development modeling summary, and it compares our recommended option, which is the staff's SMU bylaw option, or option 2, the provincial guidelines. Is this for like an average property? Because it doesn't go through, like, is this the small comparison, the extra large comparison?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, this would be a general outcome of the zoning bylaw as it has been modeled.
Okay, so the one concern I have for it, that maybe you can just expand a follow-up I have, is on our option 1, the staff proposed option, the third column there, or sorry, the middle column, the third row, it says all lots can satisfy this objective, blah, 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 and then it says that they'd have to provide a landscaped mid-lot courtyard to compensate for the loss of the rear yard. So many rear yards in the city are where the green infrastructure is, the large trees. So just to note that we're gonna lose all of what we potentially have now on some of these lots, and the only habitat compensation would be a mid-lot courtyard, which I think could be a turf courtyard, and really have nothing living in it. Would the city under this proposal have any way of checking or requiring what goes on in those mid-lot courtyards?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the city's lot coverage, impermeable pavement coverage, and live plant material coverage would all apply. And the only situation that we are anticipating through the zoning bylaw that this would occur in is where a lot had a lane in the back, which is a small percentage of overall lots, where they would then not have a rear yard, so they would locate their rear yard inboard of the garage or laneway housing that they did. Or if they had a very deep lot, they might have a different arrangement. But there's also situations that we could see where someone had a deep lot, they might still build 2 buildings on the property, in which case they might have a rear yard, a front yard, and a courtyard. So there's going to be a variety of different things that we could see coming forward, and that's one of the things we will be exploring in the next stage.
Great, appreciate that. And I'm sorry, my last one, Your Worship, is an example of, just a follow-up kind of on that point there, about live landscaping. The requirement is at the bottom of page 61. This is the built form summary, attachment 7. There's not much description. I'm not sure if you could provide any more on it, but the second last section talks about building separation and outdoor space, and that last bullet says each unit must provide a minimum 6 square meters of outdoor open space per dwelling unit. So I think that space we're talking about is like a quarter or a third of the boardroom table that we're in front of right here. So for each unit, so that's regardless if it's a 3-bedroom unit or a single room. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, yes, so that would be an average that we would apply as a policy. It could then be provided as individual outdoor spaces for the units that are on the property, or it could be some combination of private space and shared common space. So that would probably vary depending on how many units, the size of the lot, and what the opportunities were.
Okay, so that's an average. I didn't catch that part of it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Worship. A couple questions for staff. Thank you for this. I know it was a lot of work in a short period of time. And so if I understand correctly, what this does is it doesn't give anything special to any property. It just keeps the same form and character of what's already there.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, that is correct. A slight bit more flexibility for the multiplexes, but yes, that is correct.
Okay. On GP 26, you recommend retaining a consultant to test the bylaw and consult with the small home builders. Is that built into the referral, or into what we're agreeing to here?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Is there a way to avoid going to DP on these mid-yard, courtyard things? Is there a way to have just sort of a standard way of doing things so that we can have more efficiency? Because I think part of what we're trying to do and create these SM SMOOs, if you will, is create some affordability by speeding things up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Liu, what I would say is that the consultant report actually will help us frame guidelines or better understand and maybe change the zoning for those irregular shaped lots so that we do not have to use DPs moving forward. I think in the short term, DPs are a great tool for some of those irregular shaped lots in areas where there might be a projection to a setback. But through the consultant report, we may be able to remove that requirement altogether.
Okay, thanks. On GP 39, item number 4, it talks about driveways. You can only have one. So if you have a home that has a rear lane access as well as a front driveway in the front. So the house I grew up in my whole life had a front driveway and with a carport that we eventually filled in, but it had a carport. And then from the back, there was a garage, access from the garage. So in this, if you build the SMOO, you lose the front lane. If you build a regular house, you also lose the front driveway.
Through the chair to Councillor Yu, yes, the zoning bylaw is being updated to do with parking and vehicle access and where a lane is available to a property and the property is going through new construction, then the intent would be that they would make use of that open lane.
Okay, so everybody's treated fairly in this. Now, for the rental zoning, does it apply for the entire property or is your main property that, like, presumably if you own it, you are allowed to live in it, you don't have to rent it to somebody else? Is that how that works, or how do we control that?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Liu, well, there is no requirement on whether the owner has to live there or not. The way it's written right now, strata is not permitted based on the way the bylaw is written. However, if you have 4 units and they're all rental, it's up to the owner whether they want to live in one of those units or not.
Okay, or if they're family units, people, okay. So potentially, when our OCP update comes, if we decide that for these or for other properties, if we want adjustments to heights or floor area ratio or lot coverage, that'll come up in the OCP amendment. When are we going to see that? Because I know this probably put a slight delay on that? because of-
Absolutely, yeah, through the chair to Councillor Liu, it's true. What we'd like to do is, this is a first pass with these bylaws. We've been rushed to get to this deadline. We would like to sort of take this out, do some consultation, and embed this into our OCP review, which we intend to restart in the fall, and obviously be consulting on other issues, but we would like to sort of get some input on these bylaws as well. If there is a desire for certain changes, we're happy to listen and report back to council on that.
Okay, because if I look at this, for example, the provincial guideline looks at a 1.4 FAR, if you will, on the small lots, whereas we're offering a 0.88. So if we end up offside with the province and they push theirs, we could be seeing significant differences in what's allowed. If we were to consider something more of a hybrid in between, that would be after this one, so we hit the June 30th deadline, is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, I would suggest that council consider the bylaws for the, to adopt before the end of June. If there's direction to make some modifications, we can certainly consider that. With respect to the provincial guidelines, we certainly have reviewed them and have considered them. The approach that we're bringing forward, staff feel it reflects the Richmond context, the lack of lanes, the lack of basements and floodplain and adjacencies within existing neighborhoods to reduce impacts. But if there's a desire to consider other changes, we can consider that and bring that forward in probably in the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff, for all of your work on this. What a huge amount of things to consider. I know that our concern when these bills came around was how are we going to ensure affordability? Because if it's just left to the market and all the units are stratified and sold off for, $1.5 million a piece, then how is that going to be affordable? And I think the rental tenure idea is a tool that we have to ensure that people will be living in the spaces. But I think we might want to look at being flexible on that. But I understand that units could be stratified. It's just not written in this report, but people could apply for stratification. How would that work?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Glanders, how it would work is someone who wished to stratify, they would apply for a rezoning application for council's consideration. I should also mention too that duplex zone lots, we're not touching those, so those can still stratify. But for the proposed RSM zones, it would require council approval for stratification as the bylaws are written today.
Okay. Regarding the duplexes, currently we've been encouraging a policy of allowing duplexes to be split into 2 single-family lots. So are we going to stop doing that and encourage more duplexes or encourage them to stay and add a suite and turn into 4plexes?
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, certainly our sense is you will probably see more duplex development, perhaps with the right now, the way it's written, if they're rental units, essentially be a triplex or a 4plex. Whether the format looks like a duplex with 2 suites, I'm not sure. I would imagine if they were stratified, you probably would see more of that duplex model with a suite. With it being rental only, the form may look a bit different. It would probably look like 4 separate units and not necessarily a typical duplex.
What about the duplexes there's a few of them that are already zoned for single family, but the building is actually a duplex? Are they going to be allowed to stratify duplex, or do they have to go to the process of splitting it to single family?
Through the chair to Councillor Glanders, if a property is zoned, say RS1, then there will be an RSM zone.
It'll be an
rather than
RSM.
duplex, yeah.
But they could probably apply to say, why don't we do another duplex?
They could apply, yes.
Okay. With the flat roof, so if we did a flat roof at 9 meters all the way across, then we could actually do a 3rd story, like a 3rd full story for houses, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Galanders, there would be a number of options that we could do. So that would be one option. We could allow 3 full stories at 9 meters. It would be a bit of a snug fit, right? So it wouldn't give you much room to work around. There could be reasons if council wanted staff to pursue options, as John was referring to, to look at different heights and perhaps different densities, we might look at different heights, but still give the opportunity for sloped roof. Yeah, just so that there was more options, so that everybody didn't come back with a one-size-fits-all kind
Yeah.
of approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I know that height's been an issue in the past, but I really believe that that was an issue because it was a big single-family house towering over a little single-family house. And if it's going to be an extra story for an extra unit, I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue as it was before, but I guess the public will let us know about that. Currently, in the diagrams, you show these dormers on the top level where it's flat, and that would be additional living space, so that's essentially like a third story. But would that just be for like a bedroom inside the unit, or could that actually be the entire separate? I don't understand how that could be the entire separate unit, because how would you access it if?
So through the chair to Councillor Galanders, so our existing bylaws that we've had for a long time allow us to have 2.5 stories, but we have a number of other restrictions that make it somewhat challenging for people to use any of the floor space above the 2 floors. And the amount of floor area that they can fit into the first 2 stories tends to generally accommodate what they've needed for a single-family home or a single family with a secondary suite. So as we move into a situation where we're just allowing a modest increase in the amount of floor area, but we want to allow additional units, then we need to allow some different flexibility, which is, I think, where you're going. So there would be a variety of options. So one of the things that has been modeled has been showing how you could stack units so that you could just basically have a 1-story unit on the ground floor. You'd basically go upstairs to a porch, and when you went up to that porch, you'd basically have a 1.5-story unit sitting on top of it. So you feel like you've got the full house on top of a suite that could be a small suite, but it could be a 2-bedroom suite. There would be also options for people to look at doing arrangements where they basically stacked suites, one on each floor going, and it just would be that the one that would be on the top floor would be smaller. Again, in order to access that, because the type of housing that we're talking about is considered to be ground-oriented, so everyone has to have a direct access to the outside. It would mean that, in that case, the ground floor unit would just enter at grade, the next floor unit would go up onto a porch and enter into their unit, and if you were going to put someone in that half-story as a separate independent unit, they would have a door at that porch level, and then they would enter it, and when they entered their entry hall, they would go up a stair and go up to their unit. And it could be a small space upstairs, but basically a half-story is permitted to be 50% of the size of the floor below. So if you had a second floor that was large enough to accommodate a 2-bedroom unit in one space, one level, then you could conceivably easily have a studio or a 1-bedroom unit up above that.
Can I have one more question, please? The coach houses, I thought when we first looked at this, we were going to allow coach houses, but it says on page, I have it in here somewhere, GP 72, secondary suite must be completely enclosed within the same building as the principal dwelling. Are we not going to allow any coach houses?
So through the chair to Councillor Galanders, so the secondary suites will still be permitted. A secondary suite by definition needs to be embedded into the primary suite it's related to. But the SMU zoning, the RSM zoning, just basically allows up to 3, 4, 6 units, depending on your lot size. We're just not using the terminology coach house anymore, or granny flat, or any of those kind of things. So you either got units that are attached to the main dwelling, you've got 2 main dwellings, you still have your rear yard, or you potentially have something, say if you've got a lane, you've got what we would have called in the past a coach house, but now it's just called a unit, and it's just got access from the lane.
So we can do those. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'll try to be brief. I won't get into the specifics. I want to ask you a couple technical and conceptual questions. I think it's important, given we've got this handed down to us, and we don't control our own destiny anymore with it. What's the minimum we have to do to satisfy Victoria's requirements and get it across the water? And when are these bylaws effective? You started to refer to the fall we have to get it in by June 30th, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So what happens July 1st?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, the bylaws have to be adopted by June 30th. If council were to adopt these bylaws next Monday, they'd be effective the day after, which I believe is June 25th. The bylaws essentially would pre-zone, like I say, 25,000 properties approximately that would allow a property owner to build up to 3, 4, or 6 units per lot. They could build less, but they could build up to that minimum if they choose to do so.
So basically, we have no time, if you wish, to consult with residents, have an open house for the development community, economic development community, Chamber of Commerce, or anything like that, given what you've just said.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, it's true that there hasn't been time to do any consultation on the bylaw amendments in front of you. What staff intend to do, though, is to inform and educate and get input on the bylaws in the summer months and into the fall. And if there's changes required, we can make those. But we'll have at least brought in the base bylaw to meet the provincial requirements. More changes could be made.
I'm assuming then, since the character of our city could change, we'll have a PR campaign and an opportunity for people to have input over the next number of months.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yes, we intend to actually do a mail out to these 25,000 tenants and homeowners. There'll be social media blitzes and advertising for these meetings.
The other question I was going to ask actually upstairs, and I've just got 2 specifics. What are we losing? Given we have processes for rental units, LEMUR, subsidized housing, we have a good relationship with our development community. What are we losing? We're losing everything, are we not? We're losing the ability to continue those things on because Victoria has said you will do this.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, yeah, there's certain things that we're definitely losing the ability to for density bonusing within single family is gone. It's certainly the idea of multiplexes would have been part of the OCP review. However, this has been done in a very rushed format and probably to a level that we did not expect. So it's we've lost a bit of our own
Just
destiny.
2 quick ones, Your Worship. Today, you've got bylaws, et cetera, for example, and I'm going to follow up, I think I mentioned here, for example, the duplex, we start with a FAR 0.55. Can we give direction to make it more livable and go up from there? We've got from what I believe it is there from our 0.55 to 1.4. That's huge for us to start off with 0.60 or whatever it is. And can we give direction to do so?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, certainly staff can take direction and determine whether those amendments could be made now or would be done later.
Okay, the other question I had, and whoever brought up the stratification, we need to have a clause in there that we are stratify. We don't have to be specific, do we not? Can we not say the city of Richmond will stratify on a case-by-case basis as opposed to we're only going to do this amount or a limited amount? It's open.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, this is pre-zoning, so we'd have to prescribe the number of strata units that would be considered. If the bylaws were adopted as they're written today, somebody could still apply to stratify those lots through a rezoning application. That is a fact, but if there's a desire from council to consider allowing strata, we would be happy to take direction and can make those amendments if required.
Okay, that brings me up just a final one, Your Worship. On development permits, for example, if we're gonna, we know next to transit, et cetera, that lot can have 6 on it. Wouldn't we rubber stamp the DP as opposed to drawing it out? If we already know Victoria said on July 1st that you can have 6 units, what's the problem?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we can delegate authority of development permits to staff as well to issue those.
Okay, I think there are more comments to come, Your Worship. I think given the livability and the quality of life that may come about from this area, I think we should be looking at it. And I think any of our comments should be sent back over the water too. Because I understand 2 communities are refusing to do anything. Of course, we don't know what the penalties are for those. But I'm sure we'll hear more from many of the others, including our big brother across the river, Vancouver. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair. First couple comments, thanks to staff, because as has been mentioned, this has been a ton of work, very short time frame. I do want to just state publicly that I think that the way the provincial government has forced us down everybody's throat for all cities over 5,000 people, regardless of differences, water table, height restrictions, has been very heavy-handed, and I have not appreciated it personally. But it is the law of the land, and so you've all done a ton of work in trying to shepherd us through this, so thank you for that. I also appreciate in the report the efforts that have been put forward to deal with the massing, the height size, the square footage size and everything, to make an effort to maintain the kind of nature and quality and characteristics of our neighborhood, the positive aspects of that. And I also want to say that, you know, in a recent thing that I read, I think by KPMG, survey of millennials, it is important to note that it said 72% of millennials still have the goal of home ownership. So in a way, this legislation, as much as I disagreed with how it was done, it is an effort to provide some different forms of home attainability that would be somewhat more affordable than buying a single-family home. I wouldn't call it affordable. It's still going to be expensive, so I do appreciate that too. The question I have, a little bit rhetorical, but it's about the rental tenure versus stratification. I mean, if you look at the price of a lot and you look at the price per square foot to build things, if you build 4 or 6 units on the appropriate size lot, my concern is that if it's all rental tenure, I'm not sure who would make the investment to build that, because my basic math, I think it would take about 30 years to recoup the investment for building and purchasing the land, and that's not counting all the other expenses that come along the way, like roofs and things like that. So I think, as Councillor McNulty mentioned, I think it's worth looking at some sort of stratification. I don't know if it's all of it, I don't know if it's half of it, I don't know, I'll listen to other comments, but I don't know if rental tenure for all of it is practical, because I just don't think too many things would be built. I know there's family exceptions and things. And I think just one other comment I'll make is that it is really important, and you've said it, but for us to emphasize, we have a hard deadline to meet, and so we have to meet that because it's the law. And after that, there'll be lots of time for consultation with builders, with neighbors, neighborhoods, and different stakeholders to see what other refinements are made or not made, because this is a lot of change in a very short time, and people don't always respond well to change. I'll just leave it at that. But thank you for the report, and I'll look forward to seeing what other people have to say about the rental tenure versus strata issue.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So currently, when someone's trying to build a house with electric everything, electric car chargers, electric heat pumps, everything, they need a 400 amp service, and they call Hydro, and Hydro says, sorry, don't have it on the grid. Would it be possible for us to require that the electrical needs, the sewer needs, and the water needs can be acquired prior to accepting an application?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I might defer this one to either our building staff or James. Come on down.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, if that's the wish of council, there's any number of things that can be done with the building regulation bylaw for the process. However, I do think that Hydro is on pace to refining the distribution at the grid level. And I think with the sewerage and the water, supply. I think that's an engineering issue that we should hear from the Director of Engineering.
Okay, so you're saying BC Hydro's on track to being able to provide 400 or 800 amp service for all these lots with all these houses coming?
There's, through your worship, I think there is ample water and electricity, but it's just the distribution at the street level. And the issue is really the cost and who bears the cost. And short of a newcomer's agreement onto a city block, whoever bears the cost of a transformer makes the development prohibitive. So that's really more the issue than overall supply to build a house or to build a plex. And I do believe that right now the 400 amp service to a single home is not the norm. It really isn't. It's when you want to do, it's a design choice that some people make, but it's not absolutely necessary.
Would you agree that if you're tearing down an older house, or maybe you're keeping it and building 3 or 4 units on that same property, you would require a minimum of 400 amps, 100 per unit?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the amperages per unit, yes, it will be if there were a single house. Usually the older homes had 100 to 150. The norm right now is a 200 amp service, and yes, I would say that if you would have more units, but however, those units would be smaller, and I think the electrical service would be commensurate to the size.
Okay, and then I guess engineering. We know that we're asking for an exemption so we can complete the sewer work that's required in the village of Steveston. I believe that's the oldest infrastructure in Richmond. Can you confirm that?
To the chair to Councillor Day, in Steveston, the issue is really more the material of the sanitary sewers rather than the age. It's just that the type of pipe is failing prematurely in Steveston.
Yeah, I forget what they're called.
The fiber reinforced plastic.
Right. So right now, if we were to build 4 houses per lot, the system probably couldn't take it. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, right, it depends on the pace of development. If everything came in at once, right now we're going through the analysis just to see what the overall capacity needs would be. But if it's slower pace of development, the system can handle a slower densification.
Okay, good. So then when it comes to, okay, right now, we do allow coach houses and secondary suites in a number of properties. For example, the Edgemere area, I believe. What is the uptake of new builds that actually take advantage of that extra density today?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, no, there are not a lot of building permits for coach houses.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought. We thought there'd be this big intake, but it really hasn't been the case. So 29% of the people who live in Richmond are renters. What is the likelihood, if we stratify, of us getting more rental units as opposed to maybe 1 or maximum 2 stratifications on a new lot to maintain that renter option?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I think if lots were stratified or if there's allowance of stratification, you probably would see a bit more uptake in development, but those units may be either going to the highest bidder or they could be rented out. That's certainly a possibility, but it wouldn't secure rental units.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Okay, so for a 4-building, right now on main artery roads, you can build 4 houses where there once was 1 with a vehicle courtyard. I understand, I just did some research before I came, that they now sell for $1.5 million. So unless we go much, much smaller, what is the chance of creating any kind of affordable ownership?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, yes, certainly affordability is an issue. I also understand the fact that it might allow an entry-level home, the price point to be lowered, but at the same time, the concern is that minimum price point will continue to rise as you have more speculative units available.
And then now back in the 2000s, we had a whole bunch of pink stucco mega mansions be built in existing neighborhoods. What is the chances of reconfiguring those into multiple units?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Day, certainly there's a possibility to have those renovated to have 4 units. As long as they meet the current building code, that's wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, and then we're talking about 29 feet or 9-meter maximum, and that allows for a third-level developed space, and also the garages are no longer going to be garages. They'll be allowed to be flex space, which allows for more developable space. So do you think it's possible that we can avoid the land use nightmare that we had years ago, where we had these mega houses that were, towering over existing homes?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Day, that's certainly what's trying to be avoided here, and I think the design work that's been done by the team has indicated that, we can accommodate this additional unit development within the existing built form. Yeah.
Okay, and last question is, the Stevenson area, we're asking for an exemption. How long is that for? How many years?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we've asked for an extension to 2030, so for 6 years.
6 years. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Recognizing there's no motion on the floor, I'm not going to debate some of the comments that are here. I'll wait if the motion is on the floor and what we're going to do, but I want to make a couple of reactive comments to what has been discussed here. There's a reason why Bill 44 came down in the subsequent bills with respect to what was going on, because we're in a housing crisis, and I think we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that we need rental units, and I think that's what some of the larger developments, such as the transit-oriented areas and all that, will accomplish a lot of that. With the 25,000 units, or the residential places that we have, I think it's going to be limited, the amount of rental here. So I'll tell you right at the outset that I'm not in favor of rental 10-year zoning. I'd be more inclined to let them strata the buildings that they're going to do here. But the questions I have relate to not necessarily the argument about FAR heights or the setbacks or parking or something like that. I think you'll be able to deal with that going forward. We recognize that you're in a time crunch here, and we need to get this in. And you mentioned that after we pass it next Monday, it's basically in play at that particular time. What happens if whatever we pass next week is not accepted by the provincial government with respect to Bill 44 and the subsequent bills that are here? What do we have? Because you've outlined that you're going to have a consultation period with some of the small builders in the community with respect to that. But what happens if it's not accepted by the provincial government?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, if it's not accepted, and we don't know what the timeline is as far as the provincial review of all the bylaws that are going to be put into place, but there will be a timeline for us to have our bylaws up to speed to whatever the province indicates. I don't know whether they would come forward and say, you have to meet the provincial guidelines, or you have to, it's a bit of an unknown factor, but what I do know is that we would be given approximately 90 days to have the bylaws in place so that we would have time to update them and bring them to council.
I'll have further comments on the motion, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Au is online and has a question.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I have a few questions. First of all, I want to thank staff for this very complicated report. I think they've done a good job trying to cater for the Bill 44. My first question is on GP page 25, the second last paragraph, the last sentence. Now, staff said that, with this RSM zone, the permitted density for development of a single-family dwelling with or without a secondary suite is fundamentally unchanged. Now, I'm concerned about that. Will this be seen as contradictory to the intention of Bill 44? Because I think the government is trying to the provincial government is trying to densify, right? And also trying to have more units on the same lot. But if we say that we are going to remain things for single-family dwellings unchanged, would it not be seen as a contradiction to the provincial guidelines?
John?
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Au, what I would say is that we basically have kept single-family development as is without the flexibilities that multiplexes would be allowed to take advantage of. Multiplex development, that's essentially 2 units and above, would have a slight adjustment to the overall FAR and would also be able to take advantage of the flex space, which they could either use as livable space or garage space. The single-family development wouldn't have that flexibility. So with that, the single-family development would stay the same. Multiplexes would have that additional flexibility.
Okay, good, thank you. My second question is related to density bonus for affordable housing. So now, in the past, the city used density bonus to get more affordable housing units. But this is not being permitted by the government, the provincial government anymore, except for lots for 6 units. What will be the impact on our affordable housing strategy?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Au, it will have an impact, and I don't have the dollar value in front of me, but I do know that we wouldn't be able to collect density bonusing or adult cash in lieu for single-family development, except for the 6 unit. And we don't anticipate that's something that would be, we're not sure if that would be taken advantage of or not at this point. So it does have an impact.
Yeah, I think we have to keep an eye on the impact because I think this might go contrary to our intention, which is to encourage more affordable housing. But I think this may also be contradictory to the provincial intention as well. Okay, my third question is regarding 10-year rental housing. I believe the provincial government is silent on this, right? They don't say anything to encourage rental-only housing. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, what I can say is that it's not legislated that to restrict it to rental only, but the provincial guidelines do strongly suggest that strata be allowed. So we have considered that, but considering the rental crisis that we're in, staff have recommended to go with rental tenure. And that's the reason why we have that recommendation.
So in this case, in the future, we can only just make it into a requirement of a certain percentage of rental units or, rental 10-year buildings. So we cannot use other incentives to encourage people to build more rental units. We can just make a requirement and with no incentive. So stick with no carrots.
Through the chair to Councillor Au, I mean, if there was more time, I think there could be a way to incentivize development, perhaps through additional floor area for rental development versus strata. Certainly that time hasn't permitted that, but we certainly would like to explore those kind of options moving forward.
Okay, thank you. My next question is actually related to FAR. Now, I mean, some of my colleagues and myself receive probably some questions about why do we need to have FAR restrictions if we already get setback requirements and also height restrictions? So why is it still necessary to have the FAR requirement?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, certainly FAR is one of many tools that can be used. The provincial guidelines have suggested no FAR and just rely on building height and site coverage. It really comes down to, part of it comes down to urban design and it's just an additional tool essentially to ensure that the house is kind of compatible to other homes in the neighborhood. So it was felt to continue working with that particular density tool, bump it up a little bit, but it is a way to essentially regulate built form, and so we did not want to abandon using FAR.
Okay, so I believe that in the future, probably when we do the consultation, there could be some more comments and feedback on that matter. I noticed that Burnaby, they do not have any FAR requirement based on the new provincial guidelines. My final question is about consultation. Now, I understand that the time is short and we shouldn't be able to have a very comprehensive consultation with the public or with people in the industry before we come up with this draft of the new bylaws. So my question is, has the industry, the building industry, be consulted in the process of drafting this bylaw?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, simply put, no. There has not been time to do proper consultation, as we've had 6 months essentially since the provincial bills were dropped to get the bylaws prepared. However, we do intend to consult with the small builders immediately, along with the general public in July to begin with, and then further consultation in the fall.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Councillor Liu.
I'd like to move the motion and an amendment and a referral, please.
Well, let's just get you're talking about number 1?
Yes.
Okay, which is Bill 44. Let's just move that, and then you can move amendments or something like that. So that's moved. Is it seconded? Moved and
Second.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. So you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I'd like to move an amendment that we permit stratification.
My suggestion is, rather than just having a motion to permit it, that we ask staff for next week to provide an analysis on stratification and rental tenure operations. Because that then we'll have a fuller analysis of the situation, and we can make that decision next week. Are you okay with that?
I'd prefer to move the stratification and have staff come forward with their with an analysis.
You don't think we should have an analysis first?
You can analyze it whenever you like.
All right, so what do you want to add on?
That we permit stratification.
Of all units?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that is seconded.
Yes.
All right.
And so if I may speak to it.
Okay, but time is marching on here, and I think we have had something of a discussion about it.
We've had a little bit, yes. I think our goal is to create some affordable housing options. We have heard that rental is a goal. Market rental still puts things far out of sight for a lot of people. I think if somebody's looking to redevelop a site, particularly even if they're looking to redevelop a site with their own family, you're looking to redevelop a site, I'm thinking about the property across the street from me. You can put 4,000 square feet on it. If I could put 2,500 square feet for my family and two 1-bedroom suites and one little itty bitty suite, I could sell one of the 1-bedroom suites or make a 2-bedroom suite, sell it off, create some affordability, have grandma move in, have a space for an older child to start paying down a mortgage and building some equity in a space. And that's what I think we want. We want the ability to separate people's finances. Then my mother-in-law can write me out of her will if she wants, but she can still live under the same roof. And I think those are the opportunities we're looking for in this, is that we create options for people and possibilities for people to find some ownership, to create abilities to finance that new home that you're trying to build. Because not everyone can afford the land and the building of the new building. And anyone who can afford all that is maybe not the key person you're thinking to try and move into your neighborhood.
All right, so we are now just on the subject of stratification. Councillor Glanders.
Thanks, Your Worship. And so I would like staff to come back with options about this and an analysis, because currently when we allow a subdivision or allow a coach house on the arterials with the lane, we require a secondary suite. So if we allow all of the houses to stratify all of the units, and there will be no more secondary suites that are rental. So I think that I would like staff to come back with an analysis, talk to the building community, look at it economically and see how many strata units is it going to take for it to be financially feasible to actually build these things profitably so that there will be some uptake, but have options for how we can keep some rental suites being in there. So if it's, because if you can stratify 3 of them, then they might only build a triplex that's stratified, and then again, there's no suite. So we could do something like if you build all 4 units that you're entitled to, 3 of them can be stratified, for example, right? If you're going to go up to 6, and 4 of them can be stratified. Or if you're only going to build 3 units, then 2 of them can be stratified, something like that. So I'd like to see some options with some economic analysis.
So staff will take it that we want some analysis when it comes back next week.
Okay.
On this subject. Okay, who have we got? Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just thank you, Your Worship. I was going to move the idea of stratification, or I'm not as happy to second it. It's critical that we have stratification within the city of Richmond. I think without it, we're not going to get anything, and I'm supporting the referral. We can have other options come back, but I think we need to change it. We need to put it in the bylaw next Monday. And it will only encourage development, but it'll also encourage rental. Without it, we won't get any rental. There's nobody going to go out there and build and spend $70 million to put rental on the thing and wait, as I think Councillor Hobbs said, $30 million to get some side of a return. Come on, we've got to be more serious and more good. We have to be developers too, to know what we want in terms of affordable housing. We will get affordable housing with encouragement, and the encouragement is stratification.
All right. Councillor Day, on the issue of stratification.
Yeah, I will not be supporting 100% stratification for a number of reasons. Okay, let's say there's 6 units. Are you going to need a strata council? Are you going to need a management company? Is there going to be a maintenance fee? What will the rules be for people who occupy those stratified units? We think that the government, the provincial government, is being heavy-handed and coming forward without a well-thought-out plan. This is the same thing. Now, I would support a motion that we ask staff to look at the viability of potentially maybe 2 stratas. But to just say that all of these units, 1 bedroom, tiny like bachelor suites, that 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom are all going to be stratified, isn't going to create any affordable housing anyways. And with such a huge percentage of our people are living in Richmond, 29% rent, and there's only 4.7% of units available. It's very, very clear that we have to level the playing field and keep Richmondites in Richmond, and that's only going to happen if we keep rental units. So 100% stratification, nope, won't support that. Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, yeah.
On the
I will also not be supporting the 100% stratification of units. I think staff have already done the analysis, and it's provided to us on GP 24 under the ownership and tenure. Multiple paragraphs there, and I don't need them to reply because I think the details are in here. They're doing a response to the Richmond context, and sure, the average developer you might be thinking about might not see the benefit or profit of doing it, but that's not how it's always likely going to be. There may well be a federal or provincial housing authority that comes in and does these projects under the rental tenure zoning system. So I don't think it's the status quo is going to remain. Thanks.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Well, just to clarify, we've been talking about stratification and an analysis. So is the analysis coming with this motion on the floor, is the analysis coming back to us next week?
Yep.
Yeah, correct.
So we are getting an analysis of this next week.
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, yes, we'll provide an analysis as much as we can this week.
Wayne?
Through the chair, we will do our best. In terms of an economic analysis, our ability to engage an economic consultant between now and next Monday is constrained. We will do whatever we can to provide the information that we're able to.
Well, but you could talk about it in general terms. So we would have the foundation for the discussion, even if you don't have chapter and verse.
Well,
Go
Just
ahead.
to wrap up through the chair, well, that's completely understandable that you wouldn't have time to engage that, so I understand that part of it. The dilemma is what I already mentioned and has already been commented on, the economic analysis and the affordability for a builder to actually build multiple units on a property and recoup their investment. I personally don't see how that is possible before you get to 30 years. And the other part of it for me is to consider the home ownership part of it. I mentioned the majority of millennials still want to own, and I think that one of the benefits of this bill is to build smaller units that are somewhat more attainable. I wouldn't use the word affordable, but more attainable, probably with help. So I will support the motion. The amendment.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, I'll be supporting the motion. I just want to mention that a lot of this bylaw is very over-prescriptive, and I think staff will deal with some of that over-prescription as we go forward. When you look at the fact that if we do not stratify all of these units, the homeowner that wants to build out their property won't be able to afford it if it's rental only. And I'll tell you, if I was one of those landowners, I don't want to be a landlord. With the problems with being a landlord, you certainly don't want to be a landlord. So the only people that are going to come in and buy up your property to build those rental units, whether it's 5, just so they can avoid a lemur unit, is going to be the very, very wealthy builder. So I will absolutely be supporting this motion or the amendment. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Au, you're remotely?
Yes. Yes, yeah, some comments and questions. Well, thank you for clarifying the fact that with this, if this motion is passed, there will be some information and analysis coming back next week. But my question to staff is, now, staff mentioned that we could have amendments to these bylaws in the future, even within months. What will be the difference if we allow 100% stratification right now, and then further down the road we find out, oh, this is not a good idea, then we will have to change it. What if we don't change it this time, and then maybe further down the road in 3 months' time, after further analysis, we feel that, oh, we should have stratification. What will be the difference between these two scenarios?
Through the chair to Councillor Au, I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but with respect to strata, I think if the decision's made, I wouldn't expect to be going back on that decision through our consultation in the fall, unless there is a loud outcry to not allow it. I would imagine that we would go ahead with that decision, and a lot of the discussions will be focusing more on the built form and what you could build under the new zone. So the stratification question, I feel would be sort of dealt with now. And we can certainly have further discussions down the road if there is a desire to perhaps limit it to maybe a number of units rather than all strata units. That certainly can be up for discussion. But I think the moment strata is allowed, it's out there. And I don't think that's something you can bring back in easily.
Can't unring the bell.
Yeah, I'm not against stratification. However, I'm concerned that if we make the decisions right now, we are not sure about the impact and the unintended consequences. Actually, I would prefer that staff will provide us with more information and analysis before we make that kind of decision. So if staff is telling me that if we pass the amendment now, there's no way to turn back, I would be hesitant to support it.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Au, if I could just add, this is direction, is my understanding, through GP, and that we would bring forward an analysis with potential, really options for council to consider at their meeting next Monday. So there's no final decision today.
Okay, good.
I agree that we're going to get an analysis, but I think the motion was pretty clear. The motion was to allow stratification of all the units that were built. Okay. So now, obviously that can be changed, but I think that's where we're going. Okay, we're still on this amendment, and so I want to get to the question. Councillor Councillor Liu.
Thank you. If I may speak on the amendment. The intended consequence is that we build some more housing. We're in a housing crisis, and we want to build more housing. The only way this is going to come to fruition, short of the Deus Ex Machina, God coming out of the sky and bringing funding from some random source that's going to start building in single-family lots, is to move ahead with more towards what the province guideline is. We haven't taken any uptick on the floor area ratio. We haven't really allowed much of anything. It's very prescriptive, it's very tight. The one thing we should do is allow stratification so people can afford to try to do this. Nobody's going to touch this with a 10-foot pole because you can still build your McMansion on the same site with no risk. You don't have to mess around. You don't have to, you're not stuck in a rental tenure. You can recoup your investment and walk away from it. You don't have to have a rental, someone renting. The other thing too is these micro units, these 25-meter squared units, they fall under the size definition of an SRO. So if you can afford to buy one and start paying down a mortgage and living in a small space and having the authority and autonomy and responsibility to have your own little space and start paying down a mortgage, that's something, and that's something special. If you're just somebody else and you're looking at potentially this is all you can afford in this neighborhood and this is the best you can do for the rest of your life, are you going to be that ideal tenant? Are you going to be working hard to look after it? Maybe, maybe not. And maybe cash doesn't want to be your landlord, but it creates more opportunity and it actually makes it more affordable because people will actually build these things and you have somewhere to get into the market.
Okay, Councillor Galanders, then I want to call the question. This is on the amendment.
Thanks. Yeah, I just, I'm a little confused at how is staff going to analyze it and bring back the options that I was suggesting, like they could stratify two, 3 and then have one rental unit if the motion is just to stratify all units and then there's no flexibility come Monday to look at some different options.
Unless we change it at that time.
So we can change it on, so I would, probably be in support of it as long as I'm
Just
going to
like we're
get
changing
an
it.
analysis and be able to change things on Monday based on what staff brings back. Because if we go stratification of all units and don't have any rent tenure layer on there, then we've got nowhere up to go from there.
With something of an analysis in hand, we can see whether we want to allow stratification of all the units. And we can change it next week.
Okay.
All right, so on the amendment for stratification, all those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried with Councillor Wolf, Councillor Day opposed. Councillor Al, I take it you're supporting that?
Yes, I'm supportive.
Okay, so then with that change on the main motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So then we have number 2, which is the, oh, yes, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to make a referral to staff to look at increased density, look at giving us examples like 1.0 and 1.2 FAR, using different heights and different lot coverages to achieve that, and also to compare what would it be like if we just layered on our height and setback requirements without specifying floor area ratio and see where that lands, if we can do that.
But that wouldn't be for next week.
No, this is just a referral for staff to work on this, because
Okay.
once we've approved this, we may decide in
Okay, so
September,
that's
we may
moved.
want more, and with more information, we'd have a
So
clearer
that's moved
understanding.
and seconded. Any discussion on that? Councillor Hobbs.
Yeah, through the chair, thanks. At the risk of being redundant, isn't that what staff is planning on doing in any case? Wasn't that part of the report? And what you explained to us is that we'll be going out, doing consultation, talking to small builders, talking to the community about those very things?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, yes, we'll be getting input, I guess, on the bylaws. I mean, if there's a desire to look at some specifics based on what I'm hearing from the referral, we can lay that on the table, but I think the consultation will be getting feedback whether people like the bylaws or not. So it will be part of the discussion.
So my only question is a referral necessary?
Does it hurt?
I think by specifying this referral, when we look at some of the numbers here, our proposed bylaws, we're looking at like 0.88, 0.82, 0.78, 0.64 FARs. When we look at what the province is suggesting, we see 1.4, 1.375, 1.25, 1.41. If we give some options in between that and what we have and what the province is offering, it may give us some interesting opportunities, especially if we can do it in a tight space, however that looks like. So, certainly Councillor Galanders was talking about tightening up the floor space, but you can still do a 1.0 FIR in 3 stories if you so choose to do it. And to be able to look at it and to consider it and to consider those options creates more housing options and more affordability because you're putting more on a space.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, just quickly, Your Worship, I will be supporting the referral. I believe the referral is required, putting into it, because the one thing we do have for affordable housing and encourage it is to give density. It's the only thing that this council has, is to give density. And if, for example, our duplex is 0.55, it's a long ways from 1.4. At 0.55, I don't know how livable that building is. So I'm hoping that we will at least have a look at it, and it's a referral down the road, and the sooner we get at it. Remember, July 1, this is in effect. Yep. People will start on July 1 to look at properties, not in the fall, not next year. It's July 1. That's why I asked the question a half an hour ago. When is this in effect? So we've got to, as of next Monday, Your Worship, and this passes with everything in it, and in there, our duplex figure is in it. It's not adjusted, so we'd have to have resolutions or a process down the road to change it if indeed we wanted after July 1 to increase it.
All right. Okay. Councillor Day.
Yeah, I agree. This is a redundant referral. We've already got the public consultation starting in July. We've got the start up again of the OCP in the fall. Let's focus on what we're focusing on. And through that process, all of this information will come out anyhow. And I don't know that we really need to put any more pressure on staff at this point. I think that this is just referral. It's just redundant, and we should just move on.
Staff, you can take it, can't you?
Correct, we could. Yeah.
Okay, on the referral, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there, Cash.
No, I just want to make a comment, but that's
Okay,
fine.
go
That's
ahead.
fine. No. It's-
All right. Now then on number 2, which is TOA, may I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to staff. So with the rules and potentially no parking, will we be requiring, like I see that it requires a certain amount of loading space for small loading. Are we looking at anything like interior driveways, like the new Landa building, something like that, something where you can drive in, or like, the Four Seasons downtown, the old Four Seasons, things like that, where you can drive in, pick people up, because, we're seeing people stopped everywhere for picking up, for dropping off, for Amazon, you name it. Like, there are people stopping all over the place. If you don't have parking, and even if you do have parking, some of these new developments need better lay-bys and better pull-ins for delivery and drop-off of things and people.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, absolutely. There's also transportation demand management measures that are embedded into the bylaw that would need to be considered as far as any rezoning application is considered. So looking at, different uses of, whether it's delivery drop-offs and, just kind of responding to kind of the new economy of Amazon deliveries and all of that would have to be considered for a new design.
Thanks. I was in Calgary last weekend for the FCM, and they did tour us around, and they had, I believe it was 128 units, all with 0 parking. And they were able to sell those off for under $300,000 each unit. And so, it was an opportunity for people to get in. That being said, because they'd done it right to the lot lines, they had to rely on street pick up, drop off, that kind of stuff, which is fine if your road will accommodate it. But if it doesn't, then it has to be different, I think. Thank
All
you.
right, Councilor McNulty.
Yeah, just be brief, Your Worship. And I'm not going to make a referral, but staff take it under advisement. On this particular one, I think we have to do a reality check, knowing a Richmond reality check. We need a policy and options for parking and a parking policy. Given Richmond, and I'm only talking about Richmond, everybody has at least 2 cars or 3 cars. And just because you're within 800 meters of transit, Spires Road is a good example. And the streets around it, Cook Crescent, et cetera, 800 meters. Go and park, see how many cars are there. They're going to park in the street. And I think we need to take Your Worship, look at street parking and whatever, and those kinds of things, because as you know, the parking spaces on the street are worth millions, not $65,000 to $100,000 a spot. They're worth millions. Just come over on number 1 road and see. So I really feel, just because the province is mandated and thinks that this is Richmond, this isn't Cranbrook, Prince George, Fort St. John, or whatever. This is Richmond. So, and we know what cars are like in the parking area.
All right, Councilor Day.
Thank you very much. I think staff have done a really good job in responding to Bill 47. We're already doing densification by transit station. We already have restrictions because of YVR. We already have, well, I'm not going to go into all the details because everybody's getting tired. But honestly, I think that you nailed this one. So thank you. I'll be supporting it without any amendments.
All right, let's call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And the last item then is on the Steveston Transit Exchange. Now, so for those of you who are here in the audience and you're interested in those particular areas and what the province is doing to everybody, the recommendations go to council next week, which are delegable. And also there's going to be a series of meetings in July for the community, plus meetings with special groups like the small builders and that sort of thing. So there's going to be more chance for comments. Okay, Steveston Transit Exchange, TransLink public engagement results. Recommend we don't support it. Anything to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing further to add to the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Councillor Galanders.
Thanks. Yeah, so it says in here that TransLink's not going to pursue anything then since we don't support their option, which we don't, or most of us don't, I think. So what does that mean? Like they're just going to keep parking on Chatham and it's just going to, we're not doing anything about it? They're not going to do anything about it?
It's just going to stay the same, isn't it?
Your Worship, to Councillor Galanders, yes, through this process, as the recommended proposal by TransLink is not supported, if council endorses staff's recommendation, then the existing operation and layout of the transit exchange would remain.
Is there a way to recommend to TransLink that they ask Parks Canada and our MPs about the possibility of using the Cannery Administration Building parking lot?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Galanders, absolutely, staff can take direction. We understand that they have spoken to Parks Canada about this site, and I would add that in light of the Bill 47 TOA requirements that the province is invoking, that staff take a pause and review the implications of an off-street exchange, because it could mean increased density up to 12 height buildings. So there's some ramifications with that option.
Thank you.
Well, we heard loud and clear from everyone in Steveston and that they don't want this. This is a absolutely horrendous suggestion, and maybe that's why TransLink came up with it. It was just so unappealing that they could just stay on Chatham. Having said that, I wonder if it isn't time that council challenges TransLink to reschedule their buses. I mean, school bus drivers have a schedule, and when necessary, they change it around. We have a massive bus loop at the corner of Steveston Highway and Shell Road. Why in the world could we not have that be the place that the buses park, as opposed to Chatham. We also have bus loops in the center of Richmond. We have over by the River Rock Casino. You can't tell me with a little bit of creative scheduling, they could find another way to park those buses. So I'd like to refer to staff that we ask TransLink to look at rescheduling the routes to minimize the amounts of buses on Chatham.
All right, let's see now, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Note on our page GP11, that's where the staff have analyzed the online survey results and listed a couple of the top positive themes of support for the proposal. So as it looks, we're not going to be supporting the proposal, but still, it would be nice to get these things addressed or somewhat improved. So my question to staff is, do we have early plans to address pedestrian safety, driver safety, vehicle congestion, visibility, and access to businesses in the Chatham 4th, 2nd Street area, or Avenue?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, what I can say is that in terms of those comments, from a technical operational standpoint, it is a 30-kilometer-per-hour roadway on Chatham Street. There is setback to the intersections. People don't feel comfortable because of the proximity of the buses near the businesses and the limited sight lines. But given the concerns that were received regarding the proposal by TransLink, the outcome does indicate that there is preference to keep the buses where they are in terms of providing that access and serving the high transit demand that Steveston Village has in its current location.
Okay, then, can I just ask that may there be staff direction at the next, the transit, for the name of it, the Active Transport, or not, Active Transportation Committee, the one that's made up of staff and mostly, if they could include this on future monthly meetings, now that this is going to remain a problem for active transportation users? Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, thank you for the report and the recommendation, and also thanks for the consultation and engagement process. There's lots of conversations in Steveston, and yeah, different opinions on this as well. The issue of the surveys, like 90%, 80% Steveston, 90% Richmond, I was curious though, there are advocacy groups, so out of the 10%, can we say out of that 10% remaining, whether they were from any particular area or group, or is that not an identified thing?
Through the chair to Councillor Hobbs, I don't have that detailed information, but I'm happy to go back and ask TransLink if they have that data.
No need to create extra work. Thanks for that. The question I do have, though, is there are still many concerns by people about safety. Councillor Wolf just talked about it, and you did too, when it comes to coming out of a lane, coming out of a street, trying to cross Chatham. Whether you're driving, walking, cycling, or doing something else, the sight lines are really problematic. So my question is, even with buses parking on Chatham, which they will be for the foreseeable future, is it possible for us to designate parking spaces for buses? And what I'm getting at is the corner clearance for most vehicles, I thought, was about 6 meters or something from the inside of the property line, typically the inside of the sidewalks. Can we designate buses to be a little bit further back? Because, you know, they're not even adhering to the 6 meters, quite frankly. And where they park, they create a wall, especially to the left. To the right, not so much an issue, but when you're coming out, your sight line to the left is the most crucial one. So could we look at the possibility of designating their parking maybe 6 or even 8 meters back from a laneway or a street like 3rd or 2nd?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, absolutely, given direction from committee, we can do that. I should add that on an ongoing basis, we do work with TransLink and Coast Mountain Bus Company as operational issues arise to make tweaks and minor adjustments on an ongoing basis, and it's something we will continue to monitor going forward.
Sure, well, if that is a direction that staff can take, I think it's a very important safety issue, because when you're right up to the lane of the street, it's like trying to look past a wall, and people all have different capabilities and limitations, so,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, so you've heard the concern. Councillor McNulty, then let's go.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just speak to it. I want to just make a comment, and I thank staff for the report and what they've done and the people that have all contributed to the Stevenson thing. But, you know, TransLink is a public entity, Your Worship, and when I hear that they probably won't do anything, just makes my blood boil, to be quite frank with you. They had an opportunity 20 years ago when I was in the Harbor Authority Board to buy property in Steveston for a terminal. They've done nothing. And through you, Your Worship, and staff, I think this should be discussed at the TransLink Board. The population in Southwest Richmond is growing and continuing to grow, and the ridership will increase. And there's still properties available all along Moncton Street, et cetera. Why is it, and I'll come back to you, Your Worship, as a representative, why is it that TransLink hasn't got any money to do anything? They want the public to foot the bill. And I'm sorry, I think we're sitting here on behalf of the citizens of the southwest corner when I lived down there, and I'll declare that. We need to continue to fight for them. We've got people working out there. They've tried all kinds of items. They won't even rent property. There's a huge parking lot out there with the Harbor Authority. I'm not speaking for the Harbor Authority Board, but there's a turnaround there. I'm sure it's a block and a half away from maybe where they should be. But the point is, there is space available. And I think we need to push it rather than just accept they won't do anything. No disrespect to staff. That's our job. And I think we should write a letter to the TransLink Board to say that we would like to action and get some action from them and find out. It ain't going away. So as I think it was said here, it's only going to get worse. So I'm hoping that Your Worship, or I don't know if we need a motion to that effect or not, but just to sit here and we've turned it, we don't support their proposal, but in our response to them and letting them know we don't support their proposal, maybe we should offer some other suggestions.
Anybody guess? They've worked very hard on trying to come up with options. All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Someone move adjournment? Okay, we'll go back into the open council meeting. This is on the transit-oriented areas. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So I'll move adjournment. Okay, we're now adjourned. Then we've got a closed meeting. So I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a motion on closure compliance in the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, we'll just wait for the room to clear.